commence reading aloud the first of the spiritual resurrection passages. In dark, stare into Mummy's with the maggots now.
Hey guys, what's happening? Niyat here with Film Comics Explained. As requested, today we're going to be exploring Evil Dead Rise, the fifth entry into the Evil Dead film franchise. Written and directed by Lee Cronin and starring Lily Sullivan, Alyssa Sutherland, Gabrielle Echols and Morgan Davies, it follows two estranged sisters forced to defend their family from the Deadites, parasitic demons that seek to possess the bodies of mortals and feast on their souls. Created by 20-year-old Sam Raimi, his brother, and their friends, the series has become a cult classic, known for its blend of horror, gore, and slapstick humor. The franchise, which also includes multiple comics, games, and a television series, Ash vs. Evil Dead, centers around the Necronomicon Ex-Mortis, also known as the Naturum Demento, a mysterious and powerful book that unleashes demonic forces, and Ash Williams, the reluctant hero forced to battle these entities across time. In this video, we're going to explore Evil Dead Rise, the Evil Dead timeline, what we learn about the Necronomicon Ex-Mortis and the demons it unleashed, and how it ties into this film, in addition to the ending. While the comics bring in the concept of the multiverse, explaining that there were alternate realities in which Ash fought against the Deadites and attempted to destroy the tainted book, including his run in Marvel Zombies, which we've covered here in the past. To avoid confusion, we're going to focus on the main continuity, known as the Prime Universe. The Evil Dead begins with Ash Williams, his girlfriend Linda, his sister Cheryl, and their friends Scotty and Shelley heading to a secluded cabin in the woods in Tennessee for a weekend getaway. The film's atmosphere is immediately unsettling, with eerie fog, foreboding woods surrounding the cabin, and inventive cinematography effectively setting the tone for the horror that unfolds. Upon arrival, the group settles in, unaware of the dark forces lurking nearby. They then soon discover the Naturum Demento, also known as the Necronomicon Ex-Mortis, a mysterious and ancient book, along with a tape recorder holding incantations. The book's pages depict disturbing images and ominous text, hinting at the sinister power it possessed. The recording made by Professor Raymond Noby reveals that the Naturum Demento, a Sumerian version of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, deals with the resurrection of demonic entities known as Deadites.
Listen to this.
It is entitled Naturum Demento, roughly translated Book of the Dead. The book is bound in human flesh and inked in human blood. The first few pages warn that these enduring creatures may lie dormant, but are never truly dead.
As the group listens to the tape, they inadvertently unleash these demonic forces. Initially, they remain unaware of the consequences of their actions, but they soon face a terrifying reality when Cheryl is attacked and possessed by the Deadites in the woods. This marks the beginning of the group's nightmare, with the demonic possession spreading through their ranks. Throughout the film, the characters learn about the Deadites' malevolent nature, discovering that they possess the ability to control their host bodies, manifesting as grotesque and monstrous forms. The Deadites also exhibit supernatural strength and endurance, making them nearly impossible to defeat through conventional means. It becomes evident that their goal is to torment and kill, reveling in the suffering they cause. Ash and his friends struggle to survive against the Deadites, but their numbers dwindle as the entities claim more victims. They attempt to fight back using various weapons, including the Kandarian dagger, which they find alongside the Necronomicon, and it proves effective in harming the Deadites. The exact year of the Kandarian dagger's creation and who its creator was are unknown, but according to Raymond Noby, who found it while exploring the ruins of Castle Kandar, the handle was carved from human bones. Multiple variations of the dagger exist in several alternate realities, but the original Prime Universe dagger is known to burn the flesh of any supernatural entity it comes into contact with. From Deadites, the species of parasitic demons that seek to possess the bodies of mortals. The Dark Ones, mysterious centuries-old creatures that once ruled the earth using dark magic, and the limitless legion of Deadites, the demon spawn, the offspring of the Dark Ones. While the Dark Ones were eventually cast by the first Chosen One into the mirror dimension, a cradle of the damned that served as their prison, it should be noted that they still managed to influence the acts of humanity in the world of the living through artifacts they left behind, such as the Necronomicon Ex-Mortis. The group quickly realized that to defeat the Deadites, they must dismember and burn the possessed bodies, but everyone is killed along the way except for Ash. As Ash desperately fights against the entities, the cabin transforms into a nightmarish hellscape, with blood and gore flooding its interior. Ash eventually manages to burn the Necronomicon, causing the entities to disintegrate, but it's unclear if this destruction is permanent. It's not. The film then ends on an ambiguous note, with an unseen force attacking Ash, leaving his fate uncertain. Given the film was made on a limited budget by the young Sam Raimi, and it ended up performing extremely well at the box office, the burgeoning director was granted the go-ahead to make a sequel with a much larger budget.
It should be a lot of fun, this sequel. It's got a lot more stuff in it, and it moves in a different direction than Evil Dead, but it should be just as entertaining and funny, I hope.
Evil Dead 2 serves as both a sequel and a soft reboot of the original film, beginning with a brief recap of the Evil Dead that retold Ash's nightmarish experience at the cabin, with alterations to the story. It then picks back up with Ash, now trapped in the woods, while the entities continue to torment him. He tries to escape the cabin, but discovers the bridge leading out has been destroyed. The film then takes on a more comedic tone than its predecessor, blending horror and slapstick humour to create a unique experience. This is evident in Ash's character, as he adopts a more sarcastic and wisecracking demeanour, as well as in the film's over-the-top gore and visual gags.
We just cut up our girlfriend with a chainsaw. Does that sound bad?
While Ash defeats the possessed Linda and buries her in a shallow grave, he's bitten by a decapitated head and forced to duel with the rest of her body. It's hilarious and nuts in the way that only Raimi can deliver. Meanwhile, Annie Noby arrives at the cabin with her research partner Ed and the lost pages of the Book of the Dead, looking for her father, Professor Raymond, whose voice was heard on the tape in the first film. With the bridge to the cabin destroyed, guiding them through another path are locals Jake and Bobby Joe.
Hey, I just remembered. But yeah, that's right. There is a trail. You could follow Bobby Joe and me.
Finding our hero covered in blood and thinking that he'd murdered Annie's parents, the group lock him in the cellar and begin to listen to the rest of Noby's recording. Turns out, his wife Henrietta was possessed by the Kandarian demon, and Professor Raymond Noby was forced to kill and bury her in the cellar. Unfortunately for the group, Henrietta possesses Ed, while Bobby Joe is dragged to her death. A key revelation occurs when Ash discovers a drawing in the Necronomicon that resembles him, suggesting that he's the prophesized hero from the sky, destined to defeat the Deadites.
What is that?
1300 AD, they called this man the hero from the sky. He was prophesied to have destroyed the evil.
Although Annie translates 2 of the pages, Jake throws everything back in the cellar, forcing them to find his lover at gunpoint. The madness continues, with Ash becoming possessed, Annie accidentally stabbing Jake thinking he was Ash, and all manner of chaos with the demonic entities continuing to possess and torment the characters, leading to a series of grisly and bizarre encounters and deaths. Managing to return to his normal self after seeing Linda's necklace, the resilience and resourcefulness of Ash are highlighted in the following scenes, with him literally replacing a severed hand with a chainsaw, and then later cutting the barrel of his shotgun and embracing his role as a demon-slaying, female-wooing, top-A hero. Ash and Annie ultimately realized they merely needed to finish reciting the incantation from the Necronomicon to banish the entities back into the mirror dimension. But as they're in the process of doing so, in a desperate bid to stop them, the possessed hand of Ash stabs Annie in the back with the Kandarian dagger. Luckily, she's able to finish the ritual just before she died, casting a spell that opened a time vortex that pulled Ash, his boomstick, and Oldsmobile back to 1300 AD. Saving medieval knights from a Deadite attack, Ash is hailed as the prophesized hero from the skies that would help defeat the evil entities. Army of Darkness picks up where Evil Dead 2 left off. The third installment in the franchise leans more heavily into the comedy and fantasy, embracing a lighter tone and focusing on adventure and action. Upon arrival in the medieval era, Ash is initially mistaken for an enemy and captured by Lord Arthur's men.
I say, to the pit with him! You miserable bastard! Get off of me!
I believe he is the one written of in the Necronomicon. He who's prophesied to fall from the heavens and deliver us from the terrors of the Deadites.
Taken to Castle Kandar, he's forced to fight a Deadite in a pit to prove himself, and after obviously emerging victorious, he's hailed as indeed being the prophesized hero from the sky.
Shop smart. Shop S-smart. You got that?
Ash is initially more concerned with returning to his own time, but learning that he must retrieve the Necronomicon from a haunted graveyard to do so, he begins fulfilling the next stage of the prophecy. The viewers in Ash gain further insight into the book's supernatural powers, as well as its ability to summon and control the Deadite army. It is also revealed that there are 3 copies of the Necronomicon, and Ash must choose the correct one to avoid dire consequences. Now, it's important to note that as mentioned in the comic Army of Darkness, Convention Invasion, we learned that while only one copy had the specific spells Ash needed, the other 2 still had many of the same incantations that summoned the Deadites, which we'll get to shortly. In his quest for the book, Ash encounters a series of fantastical and absurd obstacles, including miniature versions of himself and a doppelganger created by the Necronomicon's magic known as Evil Ash.
Oh, dear God, it's growing bigger!
Oh, little goody two-shoes, little goody two-shoes, little goody two-shoes. Ow!
He's a dickhead. As Ash retrieves the Necronomicon, he's instructed to recite a specific incantation to prevent the release of the Deadite army. However, he mispronounces the words, unleashing the demonic forces. This sets the stage for the film's climactic battle, where Ash must lead the medieval knights against the Deadites that were now controlled by Evil Ash. To prepare for the battle, Ash utilizes his knowledge from the future, creating makeshift weapons and teaching the knights modern combat techniques.
Say hello to the 21st century.
This culminates in a thrilling and visually impressive showdown, with Ash and the Knights working together to defeat the entities. In the film's resolution, using the Necronomicon, a potion is brewed for Ash that would enable him to sleep for over 600 years until he was back in his present time.
I thought about staying. They offered me the chance to lead them, to teach them, to be king.
Successfully making the journey, he resumes his life working at S-Mart. The film ends with Ash recounting his adventure to a co-worker, only to be interrupted by a surprise Deadite attack, which he quickly dispatches.
Sure, I could have stayed in the past. Could have even been king, but in my own way, I am king.
Hail to the king, baby.
Army of Darkness expands on the prophecy first introduced in Evil Dead 2. Importantly, it also introduces us to the concept of multiple Necronomicons, with Ash discovering that there were 3 copies of the same book. This meant that each copy or version of the Necronomicon had its own incantations, powers, spells, and inherent danger. It was also composed of a different demonic entity. In Army of Darkness, Convention Invasion, Evil Ash is even discovered to have survived the battle in 1300 AD, using the 2 other copies of the Necronomicon to wreak havoc over the centuries, forcing the king to show a few more of his groovy moves to stop him. So, in the Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, Ash has 1 copy of the Necronomicon with updated pages that enable time displacement, in addition to the summoning of Deadites and other spells. Traveling back in time, he finds 3 books, the original and 2 other copies that weren't as powerful, all with the ability to summon Deadites, but each with their own spells and incantations that others had added over millennia. Ash finds the specific book he used in the future, the one Professor Nobi would find centuries later in Castle Kandar, but with the time displacement spell yet to be added to the book, he wanted to use one of its potions that would enable him to sleep until the future. This meant that Evil Dead, Evil Dead 2, and Army of Darkness revolve around the exact same book throughout different stages in time and throughout different updates and editions. The main entity associated with this book, which is also featured in the television series set 30 years after the films, is the Kandarian Demon. The Kandarian Demon is an ancient demonic spirit that is the primary source for the creation of the Deadites and several other types of supernatural occurrences upon the world of the living. The exact origins of the Kandarian Demon is unknown, but I think it was either a creation of the Dark Ones during their time as the rulers of Earth, or it was a pre-existing entity that had been tamed by the Dark Ones to do their bidding. When it comes to the 2013 Evil Dead and 2023 Evil Dead Rise on the other hand, the two films revolve around the other two copies of the Necronomicon Ash found back in 1300 AD. Evil Dead is a reimagining of the original 1981 film, updating the story and visuals for a modern audience while retaining key elements of the franchise's mythology. Directed by Fede Alvarez, the film follows a group of friends that gather at a remote cabin to help one of them, Mia, overcome her drug addiction. The group includes Mia's brother David, his girlfriend Natalie, and their friends Eric and Olivia.
I'll be damned. You actually came.
Come on, you're big brother. Of course I came.
I know I look like roadkill.
Oh, you look beautiful.
Upon arriving at the cabin, the group discovers the second version and first copy of the Necronomicon, which, like in the first Evil Dead movie, is known as the Naturum Demento.
Shit, man. What the fuck happened here? Naturum Demento.
Unbeknownst to them, the book, which is also bound in human flesh and filled with disturbing images and incantations, is bound to a demonic entity. And ignoring the book's warnings, Eric reads aloud from the text, unwittingly unleashing the Deadites upon the group.
Kunda. Honda.
As the entities possess and torment the friends, the film dives deeper into their malevolent nature. The group learn the Deadites can possess, disfigure, and manipulate their host, much like in the original films, and they continue to demonstrate supernatural strength and endurance, making them formidable adversaries. The film also reveals new aspects of this copy of the Necronomicon and its powers. Unlike the original, that was bound to the Kandarian Demon, this book contained the essence of another powerful demon known as the Taker of Souls, and unfortunately for the group, one of the rituals involved the possession and deaths of 5 souls, which would ultimately lead to the release of the Soul Taker.
Once he feasts on 5 souls, the sky will bleed again, and the abomination rise from hell.
As the group fight for their survival, the characters and viewers learn that to defeat the Deadites and save Mia, they must purify her by burying her alive, dismembering her, or burning her. Luckily, David chooses to bury and then revive her with a makeshift defibrillator. Miraculously, Mia's possession is reversed and she returns to her normal self. But after possessing all of her friends, in the film's climax, the Taker of Souls is released, and Mia must face a demon alone. After a brutal battle, she severs her own hand to free herself before using a chainsaw to defeat the demon, severing its limbs and ultimately splitting its skull. With the Taker of Souls vanquished, the rain of blood pouring from the sky ceases, and Mia, now traumatized but alive, leaves the cabin, unaware that this copy of the Necronomicon was still intact. We also get a quick cameo from Bruce Campbell, which, while not the most inventive tie-in, reinforced the notion that he was indeed part of this universe.
Groovy.
Ash vs. Evil Dead picks up approximately 30 years after the events of the original Evil Dead trilogy, where our hero is now a middle-aged man living a mundane life. However, his past comes back to haunt him when the Necronomicon is used to unleash the Deadites once again. Throughout the series, Ash teams up with a number of new characters, including Pablo and Kelly, as well as Ruby, a mysterious woman later revealed to be a Dark One in humanoid form that authored the Necronomicon Ex-Mortis associated with the Kandarian demon.
Time to dance!
Good to be back.
How does it feel?
Groovy.
Together, they battle the Deadites, traveling across various locations and facing off against numerous supernatural threats. As the series unfolded, Ash's character is further developed, delving into his family's backstory and how his experiences with the entities have shaped him.
I'm not big on goodbyes.
You shouldn't do this alone.
I have to do it alone. Everybody dies here. It's just a rule. Death, taxes, more death, and I don't pay taxes.
I didn't ask for this. You think I want this horse shit? Be covered in blood 24/7? Who the fuck would want that?
I'm a goddamn failure.
His role as a prophesized hero is also explored, as he continues to grapple with his destiny, the protection of his long-lost daughter Brandy Barr, and the responsibility of defending the world from evil.
Why have you summoned me, Ashley?
Okay, first off, you don't look anything like your photos, so you might want to update that.
The series ultimately concludes with a battle against a powerful demon named Kandar the Destroyer, who threatens to bring about the end of the world. Ash, Pablo, Kelly, and their allies work together to stop the creature, culminating in a climactic showdown where Ash fires artillery fused with the Kandarian dagger he found in the 80s. In the final moments, after killing the demon, and just before his own death, Ash is saved by a mysterious group called the Knights of Sumeria and taken to a post-apocalyptic future. The series ends with Ash waking up in this new world, ready to continue his battle against the forces of evil. And while the show was cancelled after Season 3 as a result of declining views, the series effectively expanded on the established lore, introducing new characters, locations, and supernatural threats, while further developing Ash's character and his role as a prophesized hero.
How do you feel, sire?
With all of that said, it should be noted that the Evil Dead franchise has been extended throughout various comic books and video games, which also explore the mythology surrounding the Deadites and the Necronomicon. These adaptations often feature Ash and other characters from the films and television series, as well as new storylines, threats, and supernatural elements, many of which have helped inform the wild theory I have about how every film in the series, including Evil Dead Rise, are connected.
It was a perfect day, and all I could think about was how much I wanted to cut you all open and climb inside your bodies. Don't let it take my babies.
In an inverse to Lee Cronin's directorial debut, The Hole in the Ground, about a young woman that begins to suspect an imposter had taken her son, his second film, Evil Dead Rise, follows a young family that realizes their matriarch had been corrupted. Set in LA, the newest entry into the franchise revolves around the third version and second copy of the Naturum Demento, aka the Necronomicon Ex-Mortis. Beginning at the end, the film introduces us to friends Teresa and Jessica, along with Jessica's new boyfriend Caleb, who've decided to relax on a remote lakeside cabin. In a tepid recreation of the style of camera movement used in the original series to represent the arrival of demons, Caleb flies his drone right past Teresa's face. Not only does he admit the blades that just passed her head were extremely dangerous, but sick of dealing with his girlfriend, he gave Jessica Clonopin, a benzodiazepine, to calm her down. We don't learn too much about them due to the rushed nature of the opening scene, but we quickly surmise that Jessica is extremely ill. Revealing that she'd been possessed by a Deadite, Jessica then attacks her friend, straight up removing her scalp with her bare hands. The horror continues with the possessed girl chasing Teresa to the dock and slamming her own head into the blades of the drone. Ignoring Teresa's plea not to go into the water after Jessica, the mortified Caleb is tricked into entering the lake to save her, leading to his headless demise. Showing the possessed Jessica rise from the water with a sinister smile, ready to eviscerate Teresa, the film then cuts to one day prior. While getting ready for a performance, a guitar technician named Beth is upset to learn that she was pregnant. Seeking advice and the warmth of family, she decides to visit her sister Ellie, a single mother to her son Danny and 2 daughters Bridget and Cassie. Given they were in a now condemned LA apartment complex, with about a month to leave and find another home, Ellie is not too thrilled to have company. It's also clear that the relationship is strained, with Ellie resenting the fact that her sister only seemed to be around when she had a problem of her own, before leaving without helping her family out. This is basically the worst time for her to have come, but Ellie still welcomes Beth in with open arms, despite their turbulent relationship. It's here we learn that the family are dealing with their woes in their own way. Danny is surrounding himself with music, spinning records and creating tracks to ignore his pain. Bridget has turned to social justice, wanting to change the world without having her own room in order, as pointed out by her mother and Jordan Peterson. Having recently separated from her husband Jay, Ellie has buried herself in her work as a tattoo artist and is using her resourcefulness to repair old equipment, unable to afford new gear. And when it comes to Cassie, well, she's chopped off the head of her doll and put it on a staff, calling it Staffany, as you do. But despite their typical sibling rivalry and adolescent woes, the kids are pretty tight, with Bridget and Danny visibly adoring their younger sister. It soon becomes obvious that Beth isn't even aware that Jay wasn't living with them anymore, highlighted when she brings out gifts and hands one out that says Lazy Man's beer mug. Fuming and not wanting the kids to see the discussion about to unfold, their mother tells them to take the car and grab a pizza, before explaining to her sister that Jay basically wanted to co-parent from afar. Feigning empathy, Beth says that Ellie should have called her, as she would have been on the first flight back. This would be a simple misunderstanding under normal circumstances, but we later learned that Ellie had actually called her multiple times and left her messages over the months telling her what was happening, which Beth ignored. It seems as though fate and arguably bad decision-making is now forcing Beth to confront the downside of solipsism, and after the two air out their grievances, we see the auntie admitting her wrongs and taking on a more motherly role as a protector. Unfortunately, all of their lives are soon immediately rocked to the core, both figuratively and literally. When the kids come back and park the car in the apartment garage, an earthquake damages the building and opens up a large hole in the ground. Realizing it opened up to a bank vault, Danny ignores his sister's warning that there could be aftershocks and goes straight for the safety deposit boxes to commit evil theft. Discovering a container with peculiar documents, the boy ruffles through them, finding a picture of 3 priests holding what appeared to be a large leather-bound book, religious artifacts and letters, and 3 phonograph records from 1923. Called to the corner of the vault and ignoring the warning signs, Danny then approaches a stone tomb with hundreds of crosses suspended above it. Noticing a crack in the stone caused by the quake, he reaches in, finding the very book he saw in the photo. At the same time, worried that the kids had not returned and that they weren't getting any signal, Ellie's neighbor Gabe offers to drive her around to look for them. But just as they're about to leave, Bridget, Danny, and Cassie arrive in the elevator, which their mother rightfully tells them they should not have used after an earthquake. Showing the book he found to Bridget, Danny proposes they could sell it to help their mother with bills, but is advised she wouldn't want money that came from stolen goods. Despite this, the boy forcibly tries to open it and cuts his hand, dropping blood on the book, which unlocks it. Although Danny's curiosity lures him into flicking through the horrific illustrations, weird spells and incantations, terrified by the images they saw, Bridget closes the book, advising him to get rid of it. Pushing back by saying their mother won't let any of them leave this evening, Danny reluctantly agrees to return it tomorrow. Of course, the moment she left his room, the boy goes back to the book and even starts listening to the recordings, beginning with Volume 1. The recordings are essentially of Father Marcus, the library keeper at St. Patrick's Church, who, upon finding a book revealed to be the Naturum Demento, explained to the clergy that it was one of 3 copies. Revealing it was made from human flesh and etched in human blood, he essentially sought permission from the clergy to translate the book and understand its meaning. In a cameo from Bruce Campbell, an unnamed character in the background is heard saying it's called the Book of the Dead for a reason, as others yelled in protest at the abhorrent request by Father Marcus. While the first volume was merely a recording of the meeting that was held, when Danny plays Volume 2, we discover that against the advice of the church, Father Marcus and a handful of others had begun translating the book in secret. Wanting to gain some kind of control over the supernatural forces hinted at in the book, Marcus began reciting the spiritual resurrection incantation. Unfortunately for the condemned LA apartment complex, despite Danny's efforts to stop the recording, the audio releases an entity called the Marauder, a demon that traps and possesses Ellie in the elevator. With the event cutting power to their building, the family light up candles and look on as the possessed matriarch stumbles back into the apartment and begins acting strange. Carelessly throwing eggs into a frying pan, Ellie begins making nonsensical statements, saying that she had a dream of a perfect day where she wanted to murder her family before laughing hysterically. In a moment of clarity, Ellie regains control and tells her sister it was inside of her. She then begs Beth not to let it take her babies, before collapsing in front of them. Not only is the elevator now failing, in addition to them still not having a signal, but when they look at the emergency exit, they realize the earthquake had destroyed the staircase, stranding them on their floor. Placing Ellie's body on the bed, Gabe and their neighbor, Mr. Fonda, hold hands with Beth and begin to pray. The men then attempt to break their way through one of the abandoned apartments to reach the fire escape, reasoning they needed to get help immediately. Of course, before they're able to smash their way through, the possessed Ellie wakes back up. Noticing her temperature was heating up, they drag her into the bathtub, only for the Deadite to then begin wreaking havoc on the family, moving towards them with a piece of broken glass. After stabbing Beth in the hand, upon being told to stop by Bridget, the demon drops the glass and then jumps on her, using Ellie's tattoo inker to scratch her face. Luckily, before it could do more damage, Danny knocks Ellie off his sister with a chair, while Beth shielded Cassie. Asking who wanted to run next, the demon begins attacking Gabriel and his brother, giving Beth a chance to lock her out of the apartment. To their terror, they look through the peephole and see Ellie eviscerate everyone that came out into the hallway, including Mr. Fonda, who manages to fire shotgun rounds into her before being torn apart. With the door acting as a temporary buffer between the family and the evil dead, Bridget accuses Danny of releasing the entity upon them, but they're ordered never to turn on each other again by their auntie. As Danny proceeded to show Beth the Book of the Dead, in addition to recordings he found in the bank vault, Bridget discovers the cut on her face was now corrupted. Taking the opportunity to lure Cassie to the front door by singing her favorite lullaby, Ellie tells her to open it, promising they could be a family again. Although the girl noted she looked ill, wanting to believe that her mother was okay, she opens it, causing the demon to grab her by the throat, and although the family managed to close the door in time, Ellie gets creative, using the vents to find another way in. At the same time, and now possessed Bridget, who's developed a taste for eating glass, turns on them, injuring her auntie's leg. Attacking her younger sister, she forces Cassie to instinctively impale her head with Stephanie, who, as predicted, did protect them. Calming the girl down when she asked if what happened to Bridget and Ellie would happen to them, Beth reassures her that they'll make it out of this nightmare. And not taking any chances, given how their mother had risen from the dead, Danny takes precautions by tying his deceased sister to the bed. Beth rewires her equipment to power the record player, reasoning the key to their survival laid in the final recording. Putting on headphones and arming Danny with a knife in case she turned, Beth listens to the voice of Father Marcus. In his last message, the priest admits their goal to commune with the dead could not have been more misguided. The book, which is composed of and housing an entity called the Marauder, released the abominable demon and his Deadites on the clergy. Warning any person that might come across this recording, he reveals an Naturum Demento cannot be destroyed, which is why his plan was to bury everything in a vault that would be lost to time. Despite the best efforts of the other priests that came to aid Marcus, their prayers were met by mockery from the possessed, who he noted took pleasure from creating chaos. Not even burying them on consecrated ground seemed to hold the Deadites back, who merely rose from the dead again with more anger and hatred. This led him to the grisly discovery that only dismemberment could hold them back. But even then, the entity's final remnants would continue to seek out sustenance in the form of innocence to corrupt. Things then continue spiraling out of control, with Bridget breaking from her restraints and mortally stabbing Danny, who manages to set her alight. This is increased tenfold when Ellie sneaks up on Beth and threatens to take the soul of her unborn baby. Armed with scissors handed to her by Cassie, Beth stabs her sister in the head and moves for the hallway. Taking Mr. Fonda's shotgun, she even manages to sever the hand and feet of her deranged sister with 2 good shots, but is forced to retreat into the elevator, with all the bodies around them beginning to rise from the dead. Not only does the elevator begin flooding with blood, but by fusing the bodies of Danny, Bridget and Ellie together, the Marauder takes form, pursuing them into the parking lot. In the climactic battle, using a combination of the shotgun, chainsaw and wood chipper, Ellie and Cassie team up to defeat the abomination before driving to safety. However, completely unaware of the events that took place as she was sleeping, Jessica, the girl we saw at the very beginning, is suddenly possessed by the Marauder as she prepared to pick up Caleb and Teresa. While it was great to have another Evil Dead movie added to the franchise that attempted to explain how it fit into the continuity, without the creativity, ingenuity, and self-aware humor of Raimi and Campbell to propel the narrative, I did think this was probably the weakest entry. Choosing to ignore the silliness of Evil Dead 2: An Army of Darkness to its detriment, and opting to focus on the terror of the original, but without the same flair, Evil Dead Rise is a marathon of repetitive gore set pieces. Whereas Raimi adopted every trick out of the camera book to make the visuals feel as though we're experiencing an LSD-powered roller coaster, this felt like a by-the-books possession horror story. The film is part of the series by name, but feels like it belongs more in Fede Alvarez's grim universe than it does with Ash Williams. To me, at least Alvarez kept the setting the same and tried to incorporate as many of the same wild angles and visuals as Raimi.
You have pretty skin. Get you out.
Evil Dead Rise also takes itself too seriously, with the Deadites appearing more brutally cruel than usual. Yeah, they were always mean, but there was always a playful side to their terror, and you could see them have fun in finding inventive ways to both physically and psychologically torment their victims, often through Kafkaesque distortions of reality. The Marauder and its Deadites, on the other hand, just felt as though they could only physically harm the characters, hence why the violence had to be ramped up to compensate for the lack of psychological horror. It's not just a killing of kids for shock factor here, something Raimi didn't resort to while trying to keep the thrills and scares high, but the overall lack of inventiveness in the filmmaking. It has more deaths, but they aren't as impactful, with many occurring off-screen or through a small peephole. There's more blood, notably in the end sequence that copies The Shining almost shot for shot. We have a set piece towards the end where the Marauder captures Cassie, forcing Beth to arm herself and venture into the belly of the beast to save her, which also felt like a recreation of Aliens. What I guess I'm getting at here is that you can see its varied action and horror inspirations, but for some reason, I couldn't see the DNA of Evil Dead here. There's a moment in the film where Ellie's in the vents, which I thought could have been a brilliant opportunity to show a perspective shot of the demon moving through the vents with shaky cam, long tracking shots and wild Dutch angles that warp our perception. But instead of that, we have standard shots of her looking up at the vent, the kids hearing she was up there, followed by her appearance. It's not just a lack of clever camera work, but the number of loose ends and lack of character or world building. There's no explanation to what happened to the bank where the book and recordings were stored, and how the apartment was built on top of it. And we don't know anything about Jessica, Teresa, and Caleb. I mean, if you're going to at least start at the end of the film with the possession of Jessica, you'd think that they'd cut to her sleeping in the apartment while the family dealt with the demon, but they don't. It would have taken one shot to help tie the world and characters together, but the priority seemed to be just blood and gore. To be honest, we don't really know much about Ellie, Beth, Bridget, Cassie, or Danny, let alone Gabriel, his brothers, and Mr. Fonda. We have no idea if Ellie's operating her tattoo business from home. Beth doesn't mention much about her work or the guy that knocked her up, while Bridget, Cassie, and Danny all seem to have one hobby. The characters are so one-dimensional, and it feels as though they have no life outside of the apartment, which is more depressing than the way that most of them died. Without the same inventiveness in style, cinematography, and suffering from a dull setting of a rundown apartment block in an effort to distinguish itself, Evil Dead Rise feels like a worn-out retread of standard supernatural horror films, and I don't think I'm too keen on seeing any more without the creativity of Raimi or charisma of Ash, who is the ultimate time-traveling demon slayer.
Groovy.
With that said, that's all for today, folks. A huge thanks to everyone that requested we explore the entire Evil Dead timeline. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and if there's anything else you'd like for me to cover, please don't hesitate to ask. As always, it's been a pleasure. Niyat here with Film Comics Explained. Thanks for stopping by.
What's happening to me, sweetheart?
I don't know, Mom.
I did. I'm free now.
Everybody here dies by dawn, Dad.
Dead by dawn! Dead by dawn!